Good morning. This is Marie with He Reigns Church. I hope you're having a blessed day. Yesterday, I spoke on 2 Samuel chapter 13, the story of Amnon, Tamar, and Absalom, children of King David. Amnon was the oldest and was going to be the next in line for the throne after David, but he did something very horrible. He raped his younger sister, Tamar, who was about 15 at the time, and then he threw her out. And King David did nothing, did not discipline his son, and certainly did not follow Levitical law, which said that incest was punishable by death. But then Absalom, the younger brother, wound up killing Amnon for the rape of Tamar, and they wound up being killed himself. Very tragic end to those. But I wanted to go on about in 2 Samuel it said that Tamar was desolate after the rape, and that she lived at her brother Absalom's house for the rest of her days. So that means that, to begin with, she was 15 years old when this happened. She was a princess, she was a virgin, and she wound up never marrying, never having children. And after Absalom's death, presumably she continued to live with his widow and the children that he left behind. But, you know, those things that Tamar experienced, that desolation, that complete ripping away of not only just her virginity, but her innocence and her sanity, and all of those things what happened to her was something that she was saving for her future husband that she never got to have, because as the daughter of a king, she was to be a virgin when she married, and that was no longer the case after her brother cruelly raped her. You know, and for those of us who are childhood survivors who are adult survivors of childhood rape and molestation, or those of us who have, if we have been raped as adults or as teenagers, or whether it was date rape or stranger rape, it doesn't make any difference. It still leaves us with those similar type of feelings, that we are left desolate. We are left in oftentimes being blamed for what happened to us, and actually believing those who blame us for what happened to us. And, you know, generally we hear of women who have been molested as children. We don't hear so much about men, but it is, as time goes by, men are becoming more open about childhood molestation. And as a minister and a counselor, I have spoke with many men. When I worked at the prison, when I was with probation and parole, and also through pastoral care. And as a chaplain, I have listened to men talk with me about being molested as children. And it is just as devastating for them as it is for females when it happens. We just often don't think of men as being victims of childhood molestation, but many, many men were victims. Stranger sometimes, but more often than not, children are molested by someone they know, whether a parent, a sibling, or an uncle, or a family friend. Those are the most common ones that do the molesting, that rape the children. And then the children are told, you know, don't tell. Because if you tell, in my case, it was an uncle, and he said that if I told, he would tell my daddy that I was lying, and I knew what would happen to me if I lied. Well, I did. Lying was a very strong offense in my family, and it was something that we just didn't do. We did not lie to daddy. And I knew that or at least in my young mind, I knew that my dad would believe him, and that if Daddy thought I was lying, I would really get it. And I kept my mouth shut, and it went on from the time I was about 3 until I was about 11 years old. And it was maybe not at the time so emotionally damaging, because I really didn't understand what was going on, but as I got older and puberty set in and those teen years and those days, that is when it really began to have the emotional effect that it did. And, these traumatic events that happen to us as children, they affect our psyche, our psychological being. Our psychic person is damaged in ways that aren't always evident until many years later. And it can then manifest in drug addiction, alcoholism, promiscuity, teenage pregnancy, and even in some cases it can also manifest in becoming a molester as well. And often men who are arrested for are convicted of child molestation were molested as children as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how we can help ourselves get through that. So I want to go to Ephesians in chapter 1 and start in verse 17 and go to verse 19. That the God of our Lord Jesus, the Father of glory, may give to you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him, the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us, who believe, according to the working of his mighty power. We often feel very alone. We feel very devastated, and we feel very isolated in ourselves after a traumatic sexual event, such as childhood molestation or rape. But when we come to the place where we know that there is a God and where we have accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior, we can begin to heal and we can begin to restore our psyche. The same power that is mentioned in verses 18 and 19, where it says that the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, being opened up, that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory in his inheritance for the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power that is toward those who believe, according to the working of his mighty power. This is the same power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead and made Jesus whole again. So if God's power can take a dead man, and Jesus was a dead man, and also in the Gospels we read about Lazarus, who had been dead in the grave for 4 days when Jesus raised him from the dead and made him whole again. If that power can make a dead man whole again, imagine what it can do for a still living, breathing human being, for us. Not only can it make us whole, it makes us better than we were before. We can take whatever has happened to us, those traumatic events that have devastated our lives, that have caused us to act out in ways that we normally would not have, those things that have caused us to be desolate and bare, those things that have caused us to question our own sanity, that can be healed. Our own psyches can be made whole again through the power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead. Isn't that awesome? You know, whatever is killing our minds, whether it's self-condemnation, whether it's when someone found out what happened to us that they blamed us for it, and we feel like we are guilty of the event. You know, no matter what the event, or if in my case, you know, the man who did that to me, it wasn't just me, but I didn't know that at the time. I wasn't his first victim, and I certainly was not his last victim. But I didn't know that until I was an adult, and I got to talk to some other people who were also his victims. And the one thing that none of us got to experience was him being arrested and held accountable for what he had done. And so that takes something away from our sense of justice for what we believe is supposed to happen. If someone commits a crime, we expect witnesses to come forward. We expect for people to be arrested, to go through court, to be convicted, and to go to prison for what they have done. But in many cases, that doesn't happen. And in my case, it did not happen. And part of that is because of the age I was raised in. These things weren't spoken about. These were something you kept to yourself. And you certainly didn't advertise the fact that this happened to you. So we weren't allowed to talk about it. We had to keep it inside and press down and not let it come out. But, you know, the thing about those kind of events is we can't keep them inside. We don't hold them in. They eventually leak out, and they manifest in drug addiction and alcoholism and sexual promiscuity. Or in the reverse, I know women who were victims of abuse who became celibate. They were scared to death to marry or to even have another man touch them. They became very overweight because being overweight to them made them ugly. And if they were ugly, no one would want them and they would be safe. And that's perfectly understandable that you would want to withdraw, that you would not want to be found attractive, because in your mind, that's what caused it. And maybe someone even told you that. I know I had heard when I was growing up, there was a woman who had been raped, and the women that I was around, they said things like, well, if she didn't walk around in a miniskirt showing off them legs like that, it wouldn't happen to her. Well, it was her own fault. What was she doing out drinking at a bar? Well, you know what? Those women are wrong. I don't care if you walk around naked. It doesn't give anyone the right to rape you, to assault you. I don't care how you act. No one deserves to be assaulted in that way or any other way. It is not your fault. It is your attacker's fault. And if you are an adult survivor of childhood rape, there is something wrong with the person who raped and molested you. There was nothing wrong with you. You are a victim. You are not at fault. You did not lure them. You did not seduce them. They were adults. You were a child. They are at fault. And the same with being raped. It is not your fault. I don't care if you were wearing a miniskirt. I don't care if you had legs all the way up to here. I don't care. It is not your fault. Raping a woman, raping anyone, it is power. It is something inside of them, of that person, that makes them have to dominate someone, have to have power over someone because they are lacking something inside of them. So don't you dare feel guilty, and don't you dare believe lies that says it's your fault, because it's not. That's the lie of the devil, and you tell him to go back to hell where he belongs, because you are a child of the Most High, and the power that raised Jesus from the dead is restoring your soul, restoring your mind, and restoring you back to the you that you were before you had this invasion in your life, before someone took away from you your innocence, your beauty, and the person that you are inside is still there. And you know what? Jesus can bring her back. Jesus can bring him back. Whoever you are, and if you suffered trauma, sexual abuse, or rape at the hands of whether it was someone you know or whether it was a stranger, that is not your fault. And Jesus Christ can restore that. Whatever is killing your mind, whatever is killing your soul, can be overcome. We all have spiritual wounds. We all have things that have happened to us, even if it isn't as traumatic as a rape or an attack like that. Even if it isn't a sexual attack. We all have things that happen to us in our childhood that cause psychic wounds, that cause physical wounds, that cause us to hang on to the victim within us. But there is restoration available, and that is through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I am going to come back later, and I'm going to finish this up because I want to talk about this some more. So I pray that you have a blessed day. And if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have a prayer request or a comment, please leave it below. If you would like to speak with me personally, send me an email at church.hereigns@gmail.com. God bless you.